India has now overtaken China as the biggest buyer of Russian crude. It used to be the other way around. So I think there is something there. But I mean, for China, Besant's argument is, look, it's different because they were already big buyers of heavily discounted Russian oil even before the conflict, which is also true. So I guess I'm getting to the question, is it out of the realm of possibility that the Trump administration could turn around and finally, after having literally no choice, have to put secondary sanctions on China as well?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is a possibility. It seems that the administration is being much more cautious with China than it is with India. I mean, my view is that the president might be upset with the Indian government for how how he's been treated by it. For example, not letting him take credit for playing a role in a ceasefire that ended the India-Pakistan conflicts. I think it may be a bit personal for him, and that might be why he wants to go after India in particular. And also, I mean, President Trump, I think, is reflecting the fact that he respects the Chinese economy for what it is, something that is such a powerful player on the global stage. And I think at one point, not too long ago, Peter Navarro, a top advisor to President Trump, when asked about why China is not getting this type of treatment that India is, he essentially suggested that the U.S. would not want to do anything that could hurt its economic interest. But I'll say this: one could never rule out something different happening down the road. But clearly, for the president, this all comes back to his pressure tactics that he is trying to use against Russia to get Russia to agree to a ceasefire. And for various reasons, he has, as you've noted, essentially turned India into a punching bag. And the White House spokeswoman today said that very specifically. She said that we're applying a lot of pressure on Russia to try to end the war. And then she said right after that, she mentioned the tariffs. She used the term sanctions that had been put on India.
Yeah. And Michael, do you think this could eventually push India closer to China and Russia? I mean, I know that sounds very, sort of this traditional geopolitical playbook here, but how does this sort of reshape things, or does it not, in Asia when it comes to, security alliances and what happens to the Quad's strategy coherence?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk recently about how India is signaling that it wants to move closer to China, and as you know, the Chinese foreign minister has been in India, and he met not only with his Indian counterpart S. Jaishankar, but he also met with Prime Minister Modi, which is quite striking for a foreign minister from another country to meet the Indian Prime Minister. But India has actually been trying to ease tensions with China for quite some time, going back a number of months, even before President Trump, before Trump came back to power. And I think India recognizes that China is important for India's economic interests. It believes that if it could increase the amount of Chinese investment coming into India, that could be a big boost to some critical industries in India that have suffered, like manufacturing, among others. And after a border clash back in 2020, India decided to subject any new Chinese investments into India to scrutiny. And so I think that, India recognizes that there could be some economic reasons for wanting to ease tensions with China. But certainly what's happened with the U.S.-India relationship recently, I think, has made India even more inclined to try to open things up more with China, to try to hedge against all of the uncertainty surrounding the future of the U.S.-India relationship. And as for Russia, that's a very special relationship between India and Russia. And it's not something that I think we could say that it's going to get stronger now. I mean, India and Russia that's been a very consistent thing in terms of India's foreign relations. Though I would say that soon before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you were seeing India slowly reducing its share of Russian arms relative to the arms it was importing from the US and other key arms partners like France and Israel.
Yeah, and one more question regarding India, China cozying things up here. And you point out that it has been happening for a while now. And we're also tracking, of course, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's agenda in New Delhi this week and today as well. Do you think, by China addressing some of the key concerns economically for India, like rare earths and fertilizers, Do you think that's going to really make it tougher for Washington to get things in order with Beijing and New Delhi separately?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that would be a big deal if that rare earth issue was worked out. That would be a big boost for India-China relations at a moment when that relationship is already enjoying a lot of momentum. But that said, I don't think we should go too far. I mean, India and China remain strategic competitors. They've got a long disputed border that's been the site of many clashes. There's a lot of distrust baked into the relationship for that region, for that reason. And China continues to have a deep alliance with Pakistan, India's arch rival. So I think it'll be difficult to get around those issues, even if we see improvements in the relationship in other areas.
And what do you think Wang Yi's main agenda is? Is it really sort of working with that window that's sort of left open between India and the United States? Although you've been pointing out that it's been really in the works for some time now, but for this visit to happen in the month of August in 2025, when all these trade negotiations are happening fervently, what do you say?
No, I think the Chinese foreign minister is clearly capitalizing on all the tensions in U.S.-India relations. Sees an opportunity and wants to seize it. I think it's as simple as that. Though, again, we've seen a lot of high-level engagement between India and China over the last few months, going back to before the U.S.-India relationship started going downhill. So, there are other motivations here for both New Delhi and Beijing that are separate from the state of U.S.-India relations.
Let's say India doesn't budge when it comes to the whole Russian oil imports. What happens then?
I mean, you have to worry about the economic impacts for India of being slapped with 50% tariffs. I mean, as you know, the U.S. is one of the top destinations for Indian exports, particularly textiles. And if you look at India's export competitors in its own neighborhood, Pakistan, Bangladesh, further afield, Vietnam, their tariffs are much lower than India's. And so that could really help them when it comes to textile exports. So I think India is going to continue to try to find more market access elsewhere. It's been trying to get a trade deal with the EU for quite some time. The EU is another critical export destination for India. I think it's going to look to try to speed up those talks and hope to get a deal before the end of the year to reduce some of the potential damage from the U.S. tariffs.
So, Michael, we'll see what happens at the end of the month when Wang Yi arrives in India, right? Whether or not China is going to take advantage of this opportunity of this, I guess, looks like widening rift between India and the U.S. But we understand that the official agenda is going to be, look, guys, we got to talk about this old border skirmish high up in the Himalayas where the air is thin and where your side and my side, we ended up using rifle butts and clubs to try and kill each other. How emotive an issue is that? And do you think both sides are going to be able to get over something like that, right, the border clashes, in order to talk about cooperation?
Yeah, I mean, that remains an emotive issue for sure, but not as much as it had been soon after it happened. It's now been more than 5 years since that horrific clash. And, it is notable that you've had senior military officials on both sides meeting to hold dialogues very frequently since 2020, since the clash happened. So I think the more the time has passed, the easier it's been to discuss it. The fact that the two countries got a border deal last October, which restored patrols along the part of the border that was the subject of the clash, that's really helped as well. And it is also notable that Prime Minister Modi, in a podcast interview back in March, again, this is before U.S.-India tensions got worse, he essentially said that the border has been normalized, which is a pretty strong term to use. Now, the border, it's a very long border. It remains mostly disputed. But that language coming from the prime minister suggests more optimism on the part of the Indian government that the two sides can start to work things through. So yes, those types of discussions will always be sensitive, but I think given how things have improved on other fronts in India-China relations recently, it'll be a bit more easier to carry out those difficult negotiations and, from their sake, hopefully make some progress there.
Yeah, and aside from their history of border clashes up in the Himalayas, right, there's this whole question, very fundamental strategic question of trust between the two sides when you've got China arming Pakistan, India's archenemy.
Yeah, this is exactly it. The fact that China has this deep alliance with Pakistan imposes significant constraints on China-India relations. And indeed, in the recent Pakistan-India conflict in May, it was the first time that Pakistan inducted Chinese weaponry used against India in combat operations and did a significant amount of damage as well. There's strong indications that several Indian jets were shot down by Pakistani jets. So yes, I mean, that certainly remains a problem. The India-Pakistan relationship now is more tense than it's been in decades. And that's going to figure into the calculus here for India as well. I mean, there's only so far it can go with China, so long as it knows that Beijing continues to be very close to India's arch rival.
And both for China and India, Michael, right? I mean, the whole idea, the bigger picture is that these Western sanctions on Russian oil is not really working. Isn't that really the point that we need to take away from this whole thing?
Yeah, that's correct. And from India's perspective, the entire U.S. argument is double standards and hypocritical in the sense that many European countries are still importing from Russia, including energy. And according to the Indian government, the U.S. itself is still importing some goods from Russia. And at the end of the day, the U.S. is essentially making this argument that Indian imports of Russian oil are funding the Russian war machine, even though India has been a relentless critic of the war. It's been calling for an end to the war from the time it started. Modi's one of the few world leaders to actually publicly tell Putin, while Putin was sitting next to him, that the war needs to end. So that's another thing that's really got a lot of folks upset in New Delhi and across the wider Indian public.